Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, all fans know that DC animation is far superior to DC live action. In fact, DC live action is at the bottom of the pile, with the comics, the television shows, and the video games all superior to what's being put out by the live action department. But it looks like DC's hierarchy, specifically over at Warner Brothers, whoever's handling those films, and they still don't have a clear-cut individual leading the charge like Kevin Feige over at Marvel, but whoever the committee is over there seems to at least be realizing what a gem and what an asset DC animation is. And of course, I'm referring to the announcement that they're setting up a special digital animated series to promote Batman v Superman in 2016. Very clever move. However, I think we still see a few trademark missteps from DC. But let's discuss the project, which I'm going to watch, you're going to watch, everybody in the target demographic is going to watch this because not only because it's just an animated DC property, which we're all very excited about, but because Bruce Timm, just when he thinks he's out, they pull him back in or they pay to have him come back in. But Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett are involved. And of course, they're the team behind Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, all that great stuff that really kind of got the ball rolling as to what DC animation is today and why everyone loves it so much. I mean, I think there have been a few missteps which we've discussed, for instance, Justice League War, but then they got right back on track with Batman Assault on Arkham, which is the latest animated movie. All right, so what exactly is happening here? Now, this isn't going to go to video and on demand like most animated projects. It was originally going to do that, but we have a couple of different reasons why that's not going to happen. One is that Warner Brothers has invested quite heavily in Machinima. A couple $1 million. So they're like, we'd like to see that investment pay off, so we're going to give them a property, an original content, original series. And Machinima is actually developing quite a number of original shows, which I think is a very interesting development on its own, to see how YouTube channels have to evolve in a growing and evolving market, which is becoming more competitive, and as more established and old school entertainment companies become involved in the space. So that's very interesting on its own. And I think that original content has been a tough nut to crack. But I think with Bruce Timm and Alan Burnett vouching for it, people will be more interested, and I think it'll have a very high profile. So what are they doing exactly? It's called The Gods and Monsters Chronicles, and it is a darker version of the Justice League, which led to a lot of jokes when this announcement was made, because I think people are wondering just how dark can DC get. There's that rumor that they're not going to have any humor in their movies. You know, they really want to define themselves as the dark and gritty alternative to Marvel's brighter and happier shenanigans. And I think there's some intelligence to that plan. I think it's not a bad idea. I think you can have an occasional joke, but if you're going to be dealing with these really dark and horrible situations, you're not going to find a lot of humor anyway. And there's not a lot of humor over in the Batman the Animated Series, for instance, when it's not the Joker. And I think that nobody had a problem with that. I think, I think that our definition of comedy and Hollywood's definition of comedy are very different. We think, oh, there might be a funny scenario, there might be a laugh here and there. When Hollywood hears comedy, they're like, get me a team of joke writers, we need to put in some humor to make people laugh. And that's a very scary thing when it does come to the DC properties. We don't want to see that laughter forced in there. So maybe that's a good rule for Hollywood to follow. So they're going to have this three-part digital series, and it's going to focus on this Gods and Monsters storyline, which has been visited in the past, and they're going to show a darker version of Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. And I feel that's problematic. I don't understand why, one of the smart things that Marvel does, I think, is that everything's pretty tied together. You see changes that are made in the movies reflected in the comics, sometimes not the other way, but I think they're all on the same page. And that's not without its problems as well. I mean, I've been complaining in some videos about comic books having a little bit too much of a backseat to the movies. But still, you want to have some synergy across the brands. But what if, I think that Warner Brothers should be very scared, particularly considering the quality that comes out of DC animation, that there could be a better reaction to what they do here in this animated three-part series than what they do on the big screen. Maybe people will want to go this dark. And if they go this dark, will the characters that we see on the big screen seem too light in contrast? Will they unintentionally seem humorous because we've already seen such badass characters on the small screen? So I think it's very interesting. And I think it's interesting to see DC animation move into the digital space. And the whole thing, asks an even larger question that didn't even occur to me, but to one of you, and it's actually the viewer question. So stay tuned for that at the end of the episode. But that's what's going on. DC Animation taking a larger role in DC Entertainment to promote something else, and we'll see how this works. We'll see what happens, because I think when DC Animation, now that I think about it, is used as an advertising tool, it doesn't go so great. Think about DC Nation, how those animated shows were supposed to play up what was going on in the movies and the TV shows, and nobody's very happy with how that turned out. And the DC Nation shorts, which I think never really went anywhere, never got any traction. So DC Animation isn't without its missteps, especially when they aren't driving. Nobody's driving over there, as we just discussed. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day has to do with another comic book property, but this is another Mark Millar property. Mark Millar is behind Kick-Ass, the upcoming Kingsman: The Secret Service, although the comic is just called The Secret Service. And he has another comic that's being fast-tracked over at Fox, which I think looks fantastic. I'm not quite sure about the team that's coming together around it, but I'm really impressed with this comic, and that's why I'm covering this story today, actually. It's called Starlight. They pitch it as kind of like Flash Gordon meets The Dark Knight Returns, the comic book, not The Dark Knight Rises movie from Christopher Nolan. And the whole idea in Starlight is that this astronaut finds himself when he's younger in this alien world, and he saves the day, and then he goes home and no one believes him. And he's just regarded kind of like this crackpot. And then the comic starts out when this planet needs him again, and he wonders if in his old age he can be the hero and the man and the hero that he once was. And it's very well done. But I don't think Mark Millar deserves all the credit at all, because the artist on it, Goran Parlov, is quite exemplary, and I think his artistic style and his storytelling, because an artist is just as much a storyteller when it comes to comics as the writer, is really key here. And he's a really good artist. You might have noticed his work on the recent Marvel Max series focusing on Nick Fury when he was back in, I believe, Vietnam. Very, very good series as well. And his artwork was a big plus there as well. So I can't more highly recommend you go and check out Starlight. It's a limited series, and it's available on Comixology. I'll put a link actually down below as to where you can go pick it up. I'll do both the hard copy and the digital link. Very good. So how's it coming together? Well, Simon Kinberg is going to be attached. He's the producer and writer, co-writer of the X-Men movies. He has his own werewolf movie coming out that looks pretty bad. But he has some comic book clout at Fox, and I think he's done a pretty good job. I think we were all very happy with X-Men Days of Future Past. But anyway, he's not writing this. The writer is going to be Gary Whitta, and people are saying that's why this project is getting some traction, because Gary is a man in demand, a screenwriter in demand, and that's because he's written or working on, currently writing, one of the Star Wars spin-offs movies, specifically the one Gareth Edwards is going to be doing, and fingers crossed that's the Obi-Wan Kenobi one. We'll see if there even is an Obi-Wan Kenobi one, but I like the way that potentially looks. However, when you look at Gary's resume, he's a comic book writer over in the UK, he's in that space, video games, etc. But his screenwriting, I think, is questionable. He did The Book of Eli, which was a very solid B-level actioner, apocalyptic B-level actioner with Denzel Washington, as you might recall. And then also After Earth, the real misfire that starred Will Smith and his son, Jaden Smith, that M. Night Shyamalan directed. Now, of course, M. Night Shyamalan, I'm sure, couldn't keep his hands off of it, so who knows how much of Gary's original script made it to the end, but that's not a resume that sparks a lot of confidence in me. But this is a very good high-concept property. I'd be very curious to see who they would cast in the lead role. You need an older, maybe Harrison Ford. Maybe that would be a really great question. Can Harrison Ford return to be the hero that he once was in a property that addresses that? But I'm curious to see who you think could still convincingly handle such a role in their older age. Or maybe you would like to see someone like Bill Murray or Robert De Niro tackle it, someone who never actually did action and might find themselves be able to do it later on in their career. Now, come to think of it, that's actually the most appealing to me. And Robert De Niro, I think, would be pretty well cast here. There's also shades of The Incredibles to this as well. Very much like that, as kind of the similarity with the Craig Nelson character, Bob. Very similar. So that's the second story of the day. The third is actually an article that a BTT viewer, Marcus Loera, sent to me about AMC movie theaters and how they're actually finally going to work very hard to make it an enjoyable movie-going experience. Who would have guessed that that's actually one of their priorities? All the time we talk about bad movie-going experiences. I have some really bad ones with people on their phones talking. I envy those of you abroad who always write in the comments and say, it sounds so horrible to go to the movie in the US. Here, we're all very well behaved and sit there quietly to watch the movie. And I'm like, where is this? And someone actually just tweeted me recently about a woman talking on her phone throughout the entire film, I believe when he went to see Lucy. And it's just very, very frustrating. And I know there's always that question, should you say something or should you not? But really you shouldn't. It's not your job. It's the movie theater's job. But AMC, I think, is realizing that there's a really growing problem with the experience they're delivering to their customers, and they're going to be investing $40 million to upgrade their theaters. They're the #2 theater chain in the United States, and so they're investing $40 million. And what are they going to do? They're going to upgrade them to these this new format they've introduced so far to 44 of their theaters, and that's leather recliners and reserved seating. It's a really great scenario. I've been to a theater, those kind of theaters, a few times. They're really enjoyable. They're cleaner because the seats are like pleather, so they're easier to clean, and it's just nice to have a reserved seat. You don't have to be stressed out, and it's actually beneficial to AMC because there's a 33% increase in the revenue. For those theaters. They're finding they're making more money. Not only maybe because they have higher attendance because people actually want to go to those theaters, but they cost $2 more a ticket to go. You have to pay extra for that big leather seat that reclines and reserved seating. So why are they doing this? Well, not only because there's a stemming problem, but there are a lot of big movies on the horizon. And AMC wants to make sure you pick their theater to go see Avengers Age of Ultron, Fast and Furious 7, Jurassic World, Star Wars Episode 7. I think it's a very interesting scenario, and I hope that AMC does do this. I hope they go 100% company-wide with this new setup and inspire other theaters to do the same, because it's really just getting ridiculous. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. And now on to the viewer question, which is from, wait for it, this is a funny YouTube name, Dishonor on Your Cow. All right, but Dishonor on Your Cow has a good point. So Dishonor on Your Cow says, hi Grace, smiley face, love your show. Thank you for not dishonoring my cow, Dishonor Your Cow. And says, I watch it every day. I have a question that relates to the article I just read on Variety about a new Justice League animated series, the one we just discussed. And Dishonor Your Cow points out that the show seems to be targeted at an older demographic. This person points out 18 to 34, which I think is a reasonable assumption, although I would say probably even a little younger than that because animation has a pretty wide appeal in its target demographic. Not to say those are big numbers, but the age range that's represented there is pretty big, I think, at this point. So Dishonor Your Cow continues saying, considering how other animated shows like The Legend of Korra have also begun airing exclusively online, great comparison, great parallel things going on there. Dishonor Your Cow says, also, stations that have traditionally aired lots of animation, like Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Disney XD, are now going into live-action programming, which is also very true. So Dishonor Your Cow says, because of all this, do you think that this is the future for animated series, or at least animated series that appeal to grown-ups? Thanks, smiley face. Great analysis, Dishonor Your Cow. I really like what you did here and how you put these pieces together. And I think you're totally right. And I think, as I said when they announced The Legend of Korra Book 4 would be opening in October, I believe October 3rd, so quickly, a very fast turnaround, and they actually for once made an official announcement as to when it would be going on the air instead of us having to guess and follow rumors to find out when it would premiere. I think that points to the fact that they maybe have had some success showing The Legend of Korra only online digitally, and maybe there's less piracy. Maybe by targeting the viewers into one specific area, they're able to get more of them. So I think that's, and also to maybe have a better idea of how popular it is, because maybe before they couldn't get the whole picture. So I think that's very encouraging. And now Machinima, of course, is going to have this darker Justice League series. And I would go even further than what you said, Dishonor Your Cow. I don't even think it's just that this is the future of animation being aired digitally, which I think is a very possible scenario, but I think that's might finally be the beginning steps towards animation being accepted as adult entertainment here in the United States. Of course, it's always been known as adult entertainment abroad, particularly in Asia, Japan especially, with anime and the like, but we've had a hard time here outside of the comic book realm seeing it be accepted by the mainstream as something you could see adult concepts visited. I mean, adults go to see animated movies here in the U.S., but when they're family fare, look at the offerings from Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks Animation, Illumination Entertainment, Blue Sky, all very similar type of product. I'm talking about a future where you see movies that are like the anime ones, Cowboy Bebop, etc., and you see shows like Legend of Korra, adult themes and action and special effect, visual effects, superpowers, all addressed in the animation genre. And that's a medium, and that's a great place to do it because it's very cost effective. You can do anything if you can draw it, right? While visual effects are becoming quite good in live action, I think there's still some cool stuff that you could do in animation. For instance, the bending that's done in The Legend of Korra, I think would still be prohibitively expensive in live action, which is why you didn't see very much of it when Nickelodeon made that live action adaptation. So I think this is very exciting, and I think you could trace the building of this back to the popularity of Bruce Timm's and Paul Dini's original run. Alan Burnett was the executive producer on those shows of the Batman and Superman, the animated series. And you're seeing, I think as that audience grows up and they continue to love animation because of the sophisticated way they were introduced to it in the first place, and then you have new viewers coming in who are more sophisticated in what they like to watch, not just because of what's being offered to them, but because you have these, these big blockbuster films that are not only very interesting in the worlds that they're building, they're complicated and sophisticated in that manner, but they push the boundaries of what is acceptable for family or children's entertainment. You're seeing darker themes, etc., being explored, like Heath Ledger's Joker, for instance. And also what's going on in the video games. Also, I think that's pushing this in this direction. So this might finally be the leap. I think if they have a big enough success on Machinima with this Justice League, darker, the Gods and Monsters Chronicles, and if Legend of Korra maybe continues to do well digitally, you might see Hollywood start to realize that there's some money to be made here, which is the only time they ever get excited or do anything, an animation aimed at an older or at least more mature, sophisticated audience, no matter what their age might be. Because as I said, I think there's a pretty big range of ages at play here. So I think it's very exciting, and I really hope that is what happens. And I would love to see these people who work on the DC animation level and the video games and that animation field be elevated to the respect and the fame and name recognition that their live action counterparts are enjoying without handing in his good work. So I think it's very interesting. Do you think that we might actually be on the cutting edge and we might be witnessing a transition? Do you agree with Dishonor Your Cow? Or do you think this is going to continue to be a fringe business? Write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you everybody so much for all your thoughts today. Write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching.